Hi everyone, I'm Gary Null. Every day at this time, you'll know that you'll have a voice here, a heart and a soul, fighting on your behalf. You'll see that on today's show, where we take on some important issues. But the single most important issue today is, how are you coping? How can we, this whole audience worldwide, how can we make a difference in the new year? What are the challenges you're faced with now that you weren't just a year ago, before COVID, before the collapse of so many people's lives, before the new reset, which is devastating? Boy, have they planned this well. They've taken advantage. They didn't create COVID. They took advantage of COVID. There's a difference. Would we had COVID if Anthony Fauci had not done something that I consider completely unethical, and that is, once we had the word that we can no longer do an gain of function, meaning making a virus even more lethal for whatever its reasons, and that stopped. So he simply put millions of dollars into the Wuhan laboratory, and they continue doing their work there. As an outcome, a virus came out of there. That virus didn't originate there. Research was being done in the United States, in North Carolina, and in Canada and other places prior to that. But the idea is that we're holding these people who are responsible for our problems as heroes. It's like when I saw Clapper lie before Congress. That's a felony. You should be held accountable when you testify under oath and you perjure yourself. Not a thing was done for political reasons. When all these legislators lied repeatedly, under Bush they lied, under Bush Sr. they lied, under Ronald Reagan they lied, but under Clinton they lied, and nothing but lying. No one held accountable. And yet now they hail the top people from the CIA, the National Security Agency, and all these major corporations as being wise people. No, these are not wise people. These are not our friends. These are the architects who implement regime changes around the world. They caused massive human suffering in Libya, in Syria. They were behind sponsoring and paying for training and protecting terrorists. So we have a war on terrorism, and yet we're supporting terrorism and terrorists. You see, at some point, the cognitive disconnect is so palpable that we have to ask, are we that easy to play? Maybe now is the time when so many things are breaking down. Do I believe that we can reform any of our agencies? No. Do I believe we can reform ourselves? Yes. Do I believe that the future has to be bleak and utopian or dystopian? The answer is, it's utopian for those who have power. It's dystopian for everyone else. That is the reality we're living in now, and it's only going to get a lot worse. So should we change? Yes. And so tomorrow's program, I'm going to spend probably 90% of the program on showing us how we can change our lives, even as our institutions reform themselves, not 1%. But we will transform ourselves completely to deal with all of the problems we face. I absolutely believe that is possible for many people, not everyone. So today, I want you to be able to find time, if you want to. I've got a whole show planned, so if nobody chooses to call in, I've got lots of quality material to fill the space. But if you want to call in and address any of the major issues that we are faced with today, please feel free to do so. Our talkback number is 888-874-4888. What I won't be doing today is answering individual health questions. That is a separate issue. I intend to do that. In fact, I intend to do that in a special 3-hour presentation where the whole 3 hours will be answering people's individual questions from all over the world on a progressive commentary hour. And by the way, we have a really heavy-duty progressive commentary hour for next Tuesday. Whoa. Won't say any more about it until we get on to next Tuesday. In any case, we begin with the latest. Oh, and also, a lot of people don't have our archive number. Please write it down. This way, no matter where you're at in the world, or not in the world, where you're at least in the United States and Canada, you can call that number. Write it down, please. 701-719-9976. 701-719-9976. But let's just say that you're out and about. You're traveling. You want to listen. Truckers, cab drivers, we get feedback that a lot of them listen each day just by putting the phone on speaker. And here's the number you can always listen to the show live every day. 774-337-6033. 774-337-6033. Now, we begin with the latest on health and healing. Krill, that's Krill oil, exhibits a way of inhibiting the migration of human colorectal cancer cells. This is from Victoria University, which is in New Zealand. So according to the news reporting from Victoria University, researchers stated that the currently available treatments for colorectal cancer are often associated with very serious side effects. Therefore, the development of a novel nutraceutical, meaning using something that's natural, can provide an alternative complementary therapy. And what they found was the ability of the krill oil to kill these human cancer cells. Well, that's good news. So it's just one piece of a puzzle, but it's a very good piece of the puzzle. Krill oil is easy to get, it's inexpensive, and it's non-toxic. So that is good. Also, increasing your meat consumption, which people are actually increasing it, and it's understandable. Because think of all the commercials where people feel so excited to get this, this bigger than big way to start your day with bacon and sausage, which is also bacon, just processed and seasoned differently. All comes from the pork, or the pig, which, by the way, has now, it is being shown that the coronavirus can infect pigs. What is not known is by eating the meat of the pig, will you also be infected? That's still a question that has to be done, but boy, people are really taking their life in their hands when they're eating pig to begin with. In any case, then you're getting the egg, the bacon, the sausage. I saw one commercial with hash browns, another with French fries, another with onion rings, and then another with meat on top of all that. Keep in mind, your body cannot store protein. It goes through what is called deamonization. It's a breakdown, meaning if your body can't use what you're eating, generally depending upon your age and the amount of protein you require, your body size, you might need 20 grams at a meal. If you're the average person, even weightlifters and bodybuilders, it's not more protein you need, it's more complex carbohydrate. And so you're overeating protein, and the trouble is there's two byproducts when protein is broken down. Ammonia, and also you're getting purines in there, and that can cause all forms of pain in your joints and lead to lactic acid crystals. And so that taxes the liver and the kidneys. So you're beginning to see more people on high-protein diets have problems with their liver and kidneys. By the way, I saw this in the 1970s. A very close personal friend of mine was Robert Atkins. We hung out together. Totally different approaches to diet, needless to say. And I used to kid Bob. But I kidded him, but it was actually true. I saw a lot of his patients who went on his diet and then had all these byproducts of all that fat and pork and beef. We go to a restaurant to eat, and I'd be eating a vegan meal, and he'd be eating as much protein as they could pile on a plate. But I said, Bob, at some point you're going to have to realize losing weight shouldn't be the object of the exercise. Having a person healthier and living a longer life should be. Yeah. Interesting, before he died, he was interested in doing a book with me on this very topic. Would he have transcended the limitations of the high protein phase, which was very profitable, and go into a more realistic, scientifically based phase? We'll never know. But we were all ready to go. We had agreed upon a publisher to do a book together. We'd done a tour together. But I said, the more meat you eat, the more conditions you have, the shorter your lifespan. And we had the science to back it up. Well, here's the latest, Mount Sinai School of Medicine. Quote, increased meat consumption associated with symptoms of childhood asthma. Now, substances present in cooked meat, and after all, you're not going to eat raw meat. Though I've seen people do that. There was a large Syrian community in my hometown, and the leader of that whole community I knew, Mr. Brock. Well, Tom Brock was this giant of a guy. He looked like Paul Bunyan. He was like 6'8", 300 pounds, all muscle, by the way. We worked out together. We built a gym together. It was in a garage because there was no YMCA and there was no general gym for people to go to. So anybody who wanted to work out could come by there every night. We'd be lifting the weights, and Tom was the big one. I was actually 232 pounds, all muscle. I was the small guy. And I would be eating lots of potatoes, baked potatoes, and beans. He'd be eating, one day I saw him eat 10 hamburgers in a row. I'm thinking, whoa. Now, mind you, I wasn't a nutritionist then. But but also one day he came in, he had, what did he call it? Was it called, someone who's Syrian in the audience will know the real pronunciation. I'm sure I'm not going to get it right. Kibi. It was raw meat with some diced up onions and garlic in it and salt and pepper. And they'd wrap it up into this little dough bread and eat it. And I said, there's all kinds of parasites and bacteria in there. He says, no, so what? Just imagine how many people have gotten food poisoning from eating raw meat. In any case, when you're eating cooked meat, you're flooding the body, according to the published peer-reviewed journal Thorax, with pro-inflammatory compounds. Now, these are not just cytokines. These are very dangerous. They're called advanced glycation, that's Glycation, end products, or AGEs, AGE with a small s. And the more of the advanced glycation you have in your body, the faster your DNA ages, the more damage occurs to your DNA, the more inflammation you have, the shorter your telomeres. You simply speed up your aging process. Imagine you're watching your life, and it's a normal time, and suddenly you just have compulsions, and you just can't discipline yourself, and you just keep hitting the fast forward button. And so your life is going very fast. And someone says, what's going on? I'm living my life out very fast because I can't control my impulses. Slow it down. Now we know you can do just the opposite. You can go on very slow. So what will be a 10-year period in your life will be a 20-year period in someone else's. That's why we all don't look the same at the same age. So we have to understand something. Going into the new year, you are 2 ages, and it's only your biological age that counts. Your chronological age is not relevant. Yet we've only made the chronological age all that was relevant. So the more meat you eat, the more of these advanced glycation end products, and that destroys your body. And asthma prevalence among children in the United States has risen tremendously, and it's risen in direct proportion to how much meat we are consuming. Mind you, your body can only handle between 40 to about 60 grams of protein a day, and the average person is eating far more than that. That is not healthy. Also, from the University of Barcelona, which is in Spain, published in the peer-reviewed journal Science Bulletin, comes a study about Nano Plastics. These are tiny little particulates, sometimes you can't even see them, that are in our water that you drink. They're in our food. They're in the air because of how these break down. But what happens when they get into your body? They alter your intestinal microbiome, and that threatens your human health. So this is a very important study. It was done at the Center for Environmental and Marine Studies at the University of Portugal. And it verifies that the nanoparticles, like people boiling, let's say, one of the convenience soups, it comes in a little package and you stick it in boiling water, that leaches. You put heat, high heat, against any plastic, it's going to leach the plastic. Microwaving leaches the plastic. It leaches the aluminum. Remember all those stupid TV dinners? I'm sure my family wasn't the only one. Had that little tray, and you'd pop in the TV dinner, and you put it down and watch television. Sid Caesar, or whatever it was. Well, all that aluminum was getting into our bodies. Not good. And that affects our intestinal microbiome, which is where our immune system benefits us if it's good things going in, and is harmful if it's bad. Now, in a moment or two, I'm going to tell you about good things to put in your intestine to help your bacteria. Anyhow, try wherever possible to stay away from shellfish. Why? Because now we know that mollusks, crustaceans, shrimp, lobster, they consume these products on the ocean floor, and they're filled with nanoplastics. And there's recent vitro analysis using cell cultures of fish and mammals, and it's allowed us to analyze the changes in gene expression associated with the presence of nanoplastics from a toxicological point of view. You're just healthy if you stay away from all that. All right? Because once it's in there, it becomes invasive and it becomes toxic. And then you have to go through a whole detoxification process. And finally, from Brown University comes a study about cacao. That's raw chocolate, COCOA. It's linked to some cardiovascular biomarker improvements. Now, there are probably, I'm guessing, 300 to 400 studies right now on how healthy cacao is. Now, you can have an unhealthy chocolate with lots of sugar and milk and bad fats, or emulsifiers, or you can have a healthy chocolate. A healthy organic chocolate is terrific for your heart. You don't need a lot, maybe an ounce a day. It's rich in flavonols, and that can benefit your entire cardiovascular system. So they took a look at 19 randomized controlled trials of cacao consumption, and an article published from this meta-analysis in the Journal of Nutrition showed that all of these 19 studies showed improvement with specific circulating biomarkers in cardiometabolic health as compared to eating a placebo. So good news, eat your healthy chocolate and your heart stays healthier. I'm Gary Null. We are 18 minutes into our program. We're going to take a break. And when we come back from the break, I'm going to see if we have any calls about the issues that you are faced with this year. And if not, I've got a lot of information to share with you. I am going to start off by sharing something that we have yet to see in our Congress, either from the Senate, the House. This is from the British government. It's a parliament. And this person stood up and made some astonishing remarks about the lockdown. And he has science on his side. We are sharing the science. And by the way, I've just today sent Tucker Carlson a letter. It's a long letter, but in it I share the idea that I appreciate that when he has Glenn Greenwald on and Robert Kennedy Jr. and other people who have been banned by the liberal media, even though they were all liberals, and because they had the temerity to tell the truth about some issues. And so I encouraged him to continue that. And then I said, one of the many issues you and I do not agree upon is climate change. And you said that there is no proof that humans impacted the climate. Yes, it's warmer, you said, as if that was, okay, so it's warmer. It's far more than just being warmer. It's really bad. And by the way, for those of you who say, well, I'm eating beef, but it's organic meat. The latest study shows that it doesn't matter. Organic meat or regular genetically modified meat, it's still bad to the bone for the environment. All right? It is not healthy. And it's also not healthy for you if you understand everything else about meat that is dangerous, including heterocyclic amines. The moment you cook organic meat, it is toxic. I don't care if it's beef, lamb, that's organic. It may make you feel good that you've got organic, but it's not making the cow feel that somehow they should smile eating in a pasture when you're going to slaughter them. So at every level, that's just a game people are playing. It's like, shopping in Whole Foods, making the world's wealthiest man wealthier, when look at him and do you really believe that that's the right thing to do? Anyhow, just want to let you know that organic chicken is much better if it's just a chicken. Let it go out and eat ticks and insects. It'll eat everything, and they're loving and friendly. It's just saying that, well, we ate organic chicken. Yeah. Did you eat it raw? Well, no. Well, you cooked it. It's already causing inflammation. We got to stop playing these games. All right? They don't work. In any case, I've got a lot to share with you. We're going to take a break and come back. Please stay with us.
Policy of the government has been disproportionate in response to this threat. There may, Madam Deputy Speaker, be a virus one day that threatens our very way of life. But this isn't it, even if we're behaving as if it were.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Madam Deputy Speaker, less than a year ago, I celebrated what I thought was the election of a sceptical and liberal Conservative administration. And now I'm left wondering if the Prime Minister hasn't been abducted by Dr. Strangelove and reprogrammed by the sage over to the dark side. The purpose of politicians is to impose a measure of proportion, a sense of proportion on science, and not to be enthralled to it. Now, I will make myself very unpopular, but I believe that the appearance of the chiefs last week should have been a sacking offence. When they presented that graph, with the caveat that it wasn't a prediction, but nevertheless, it was clear that they presented it as a plausible scenario, with its 50,000 cases per day by mid-October, based on the doubling of infections by the week. Not once, not on one day since March, have there been infections on that day that were double that of the day of the week preceding. Not once. Where did this doubling come from? What was their purpose in presenting such a graph? It was the purpose of the fat boy in Pickwick Papers. I wants to make your flesh creep. It was Project Fear. It was an attempt to terrify the British people as if they haven't been terrified enough. Now, I've been banging on about this since March, and every criticism I've made, I've been told that the government was relying on the best possible science. So I am delighted by the letter 1 week ago today, the nuanced criticism of Professors Hennigan, Gupta and Sikora. And I believe that it is now the government that has to answer that criticism. I'm glad that the consensus in the scientific community is broken and the critics are speaking out. I don't underestimate for one moment the horrible nature of this disease and its post-viral syndrome. But in terms of the United Kingdom's killers, it is 24th in the league, accounting for only 1.4 of us. And as a consequence, I believe that the government's policy has been disproportionate. By decree, it has interfered in our private lives and our family lives, telling who we may meet, when we may meet them, and what we must wear when we meet them. We have the cruelty.
Good for him. He mentioned the criticism by the British government of three he named Dr. Gupta. These happen to be three of the brightest professors in the world, one from Harvard, one from Stanford, and one from Oxford University. Together, they saw the misinformation that was being put forth on a political basis in order to impact the coronavirus, the lockdowns, for example. Today, we have over 53,000 of the world's scientists, physicians, who have signed that. I've signed it. And multiple Nobel Prize winners have signed it. You're talking about the world's top virologists, immunologists, bacteriologists, a microbiologist, a public health specialist, all have signed it. Not a word in any of the major media. It's been deplatformed everywhere. So now we have the establishment fighting the establishment. You've never seen that before in American history at this level. This is just the beginning of this fight. So when he speaks out in Parliament, good for him. I'm going to give you some real summary, real quick, of things that are all coming together. And then I'm going to take some calls. I see some calls up now. Good. 888-874-4888. This is from the U.S. National Cancer Institute today. Quote, studies find having COVID-19 may protect against reinfection. Good. All right. That's one study. And then another study, this is from Monash University, says, quote, in Australia, COVID immunity lasts up to 8 months, new data reveal. Quote, Australian researchers have revealed for the first time that people who have been infected with the COVID-19 virus have immune memory to protect against reinfection for at least 8 months. That's great. So this is your body's immune system. That's what I've been telling you all along, that they should not be testing people who are healthy. They should not be testing people who are not in the risk groups. Yes, test the people who have comorbidities. Test the seniors and senior citizens who have comorbidities. Those are the people who have been shown repeatedly in thousands of examples to be most likely to end up sick. But then give them the medications, the orthodox mainstream medications that have been proven not to be toxic and very beneficial. When someone says, well, how do we know? Because the New York Times and all this say there's no proof. We posted on prn.fm 210 articles, 145 from the peer-reviewed literature. The preponderance of those articles, like 95%, showed positive, saving lives. Saving lives and keeping you, if you have some symptoms, from getting worse and going to the hospital. If you're in the hospital, keeps you alive. And not just one drug, ivermectin, and we have multiple drugs that the mainstream has been using on billions of people collectively. And yet, because we're not using them, it's because of politics. That's because of Anthony Fauci and the people who want to control the profit stream from this and control the narrative. Let me give you a few more things on this. As of today, according to the latest research, 54 million people in the United States, including 18 million children, don't have enough food to eat. All right? They're hungry. How can we possibly allow 54 million or 5 million or 1 million people to go hungry when we have an abundance of food, an abundance of good people in this country with warm hearts and a loving disposition? How can we walk by someone who's hungry? I can't do that. I don't do that. I try to feed. I'm not going to virtue signal anybody. I don't tell you what I do, but let me tell you something. I do it every single day, 7 days a week, and I've been doing this for 50 years. And I will not talk about what I do, but I just want people to know that you have the power to help other people. And so let's begin to help, because it breaks my heart when I hear 54 million people. That's more people than live in any state. In fact, that's more people than live in California and in Texas combined. So, or near that. So we've got to deal with that. And this has only made it worse. Also, The archive reveals, this is something new, 4,000 documents that the government knew for decades that wireless technology was dangerous. This is according to Dr. Zirk Glaser, who spent decades archiving studies that examine the link between certain health issues and exposure to microwave and radio frequencies. And the government hid this from the public. Hid it. Didn't allow anyone to know this. All so that all the major industries, the telecom industries, the wireless industries could profit. So we've written 14 articles on the dangers of 5G. This article that goes into these 4,000 separate documents is now on prn.fm, and we want to thank Robert Kennedy, Mary Holland, and all the people at the Children's Health Defense for putting this article together. Good for you. So once again, the Food and Drug Administration, the U.S. Public Health Service, the U.S. Navy, the National Institutes of Occupational Safety, NIOSH, all knew, and the Bureau of Radiological Health all knew that all forms of Wi-Fi and 1G, 2G, 3, 4, and 5G were all dangerous, cause cancers, nervous system disorders, environmental sensitivity, and they hid it, just like they hid tobacco being addictive and causing cancer for 100 years, just like they hid asbestos, just like they hid DDT. Go to the archives and download the Progressive Commentary Hour on the Great Reset that I had, because this is the latest. This is from RT News. Good work over there, by the way. And this is from Dr. Matthew Mavak, with two A's, M-A-A-V-A-K. Quote, COVID-19 lockdowns are in lockstep with the Great Reset. I'll just quote 2 paragraphs. Who benefits from lockdowns that are destabilizing all facets of our society? Look no further than the emerging global oligarchy. In October 2019, a pandemic simulation exercise called Event 201, a collaborative effort between Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, the World Economic Forum, and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Steve Brown, they concluded that a hypothetical new coronavirus may end up killing at least 65 million people worldwide within 18 months of an outbreak. When COVID-19 coincidentally emerged from Wuhan 2 months later, scientists were rushing to generate similar alarmist forecasts using a variety of questionable scientific models. Researchers from the Imperial College London, for instance, approximated, mind you, this is pure guess, and they were wrong. I mean, they were out of the ballpark wrong. But everything that happened in Great Britain, in France, in Germany, in Italy, in the United States, and Canada came from this clown in the Imperial College London who was wrong. He's been wrong on multiple occasions. And he said, we're going to lose 500,000 people in the United Kingdom and 2 million more in the United States by October this year. And while scientific models are admittedly fallible, one would nonetheless be hard-pressed to justify the endless string of contradictions, discrepancies, and willful amnesia in the global pandemic narrative. Was it the science of mass-mediated hysteria? There are many troubling questions yet answered. Perhaps what we are really dealing with is a case of mass coronapsychoses, as Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko aptly called it. Who benefits from global lockdowns that are destabilizing all facets of our society? The following 4 great undercurrents may provide a clue: the great deflection. As this author has warned for more than a decade, the world is staring at a confluence of risk overloads, socioeconomic meltdowns, and second Great Depression. For the ruling classes, COVID-19 is fortuitously deflecting public attention away from the disastrous consequences of decades of economic mismanagement and wealth fractionalization. The consolidation of big tech with big media has created an Orwellian world where collective hysteria is shifting loci from boogeyman like Russia to those who disagree with the pandemic narrative. We have entered a new normal where North Korea affords more ambulatory freedom than Melbourne, Australia. While rioting and mass demonstrations by assorted radicals are given a free pass, even encouraged by leaders in the West, Facebook posts questioning lockdowns are deemed subversive, This is a world where Australian blue shirts beat up women, manhandle a pregnant woman, the blue shirts are police, in her own home, and perform wolf pack policing on an elderly lady in a park. Yet the Premier of Australia State, Victoria, remains unfazed by the unflattering moniker of Kim Jong-dan. The corona totalitarianism is unsurprisingly most pronounced in the Anglosphere and its dependencies. After all, these nations are staring at socioeconomic bankruptcies of unprecedented proportions vis-a-vis their counterparts. Even their own governments are being systematically undermined from within. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security, created in the aftermath of 9/11 to combat terrorism, is now providing $10 million in grants to organizations which supposedly combat, quote, far-right extremism and white supremacy. This will further radicalize left malcontents who are raising down U.S. cities and its economies in the name of social justice. There is, however, a curious rationale behind this inane policy, as the following section illustrates: the great wealth transfer. That's it, the great wealth transfer. Quote, while the circus continues, the bread is thinning out, except for the top 0.001%. Instead of bankruptcy, as recent trends indicated, Silicon Valley and affiliated monopolies are noticing tremendous record profits along with record social media censorships. U.S. billionaires raked in $434 billion in the first 2 months of the lockdown alone. The more the lockdowns, the more the wealth accrued to the techno elite. As tens of millions of individuals and small businesses face bankruptcy by Christmas, the remote work revolution is gifting multi-billion-dollar jackpots to the likes of Jeff Bezos, Amazon, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Azure, Microsoft, and AWS, Amazon. Cloud ecosystems, among others, have expanded by 50% since the beginning of the pandemic. In the face of such runaway wealth fractionalization, the contact tracing tools from big tech are increasingly employed to pacify restive populations and, of course, to prevent a second, third, or ninth wave of coronavirus for our collective good. In the meantime, big banks, big pharma, big tech, and other monopolies are getting lavish central bank bailouts or stimulus packages to gobble up struggling smaller enterprises. COVID-19 is a gift that never stops giving to a select few. But how will the techno-oligarchy maintain a degree of social credibility and control in an impoverished and tumultuous world? The great philanthropic effort. Oligarchy philanthropic efforts will be dominant feature of the volatile uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity decade. And so it goes. And it's a very important article. I have posted it on prn.fm. Read it, because the people behind the Great Reset have two things in common. One, they're going to get enormous wealth, and two, they're going to control every aspect of your life, every single aspect. So, just a few things. And by the way, for those of you who are very happy about Biden's selections, well, not one is progressive, not one. He just tapped Bruce Reed, who's a deficit hawk, longtime enemy of Social Security, for Deputy Chief of Staff. That means that for those of us who our income also comes from Social Security, this guy wants to use your Social Security, cut Social Security. So take a careful look at all the people around him. And by the way, Biden's pick for Agriculture Secretary is someone I've challenged many times, Tom Vilsack. Yeah, that parasite. He's a corporate ass-kiss yes man and former lobbyist for with a dismal record in his previous time as secretary. And yet, there's Tom Vilsack. It's like Barack Obama never left. All of his people are coming out of the closet. And by the way, isn't it amazing that Donald Trump pardoned the killers, the people from the site that in Blackwater, the military contractors who were jailed, rightly so, for massacring more than a dozen innocent Iraqi civilians, including 2 children in Baghdad in 2007? Who exposed that? Julian Assange. How would we have known about it? We wouldn't have. It was Julian Assange who exposed the U.S. war crimes. Trump pardons the criminals, and keeps Julian Assange in jail. If there's one thing he could do right before he leaves office, pardon Julian Assange, no matter what anyone says in the pushback. Mind you, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama wanted to put Julian Assange in prison, and all the whistleblowers in prison. In fact, it was I think, what was it, 7 or 8 whistleblowers were attacked by Barack Obama. So the people who committed crimes in governmental agencies, they get bonuses, and the people who expose the crimes, you get prison. And unfortunately, that's the way it works. So now let's go over and say hello to one of the people, Rich from Long Island. Hi, Rich, your turn.
Gary, good afternoon. I want to just say quick thanks to you for all the things you do in the big picture. We love you. On a personal note, the information empowerment that you've given me for the last 25 years for me and my family have been incredible. So thank you, Gary. And sometimes it's just a needed thing to say.
Thank you.
My frustration, Gary, is that I just turned 60 chronologically, and I cannot find a peer, within a decade either way, who is, forget about like-minded, even open-minded to all these things that you just said. All these things, they don't want to hear anything that I bring up, that I want to educate. And my concern is that there is no platform. I maybe I'm old school and I don't realize that still the networks is really where the majority have to get their information from. But my point is that no one is getting any of this information. No one is, other than us, our community. And I realize that we could do things with 1% of the people standing up, but it's a shame that the people who have been just sheep. That's the best thing I can say is throughout this COVID, yes, we'll do this. Yes, okay, now we'll do that. Okay, we won't go here. We won't go now. Yes, I can't wait to get the shot. It's just very frustrating that no one is, at least my peers, no one listens to this show, that they don't want to hear it. And that's
okay.
That's my frustration. We want to help other people.
Rich, all of us have faced that with our own family members, with friends. And so I simply have a policy. I don't bring anything up to friends and family that I believe they would be opposed to. They're not stupid people. If they want information, they'll contact me, and I'll be happy to share it. For example, ask your friends, just as a point of curiosity, how many people got the COVID on December 18th? The vaccine on COVID on 18th? 112,807 Americans have been vaccinated. There were 3,150 health impacts. That's 3% in just 24 hours. Now, when you start looking at how many people they want to vaccinate, they keep saying, the whole population, the whole population. Well, the whole population, no one knows the exact number. The latest one this morning is 341 million, but that does not include the illegal aliens. When you add them in, you're up to about more or less 350 million Americans. Let's just say they're really successful with propagandizing and they get 300 million. 3% of 300 million is 9 million people. Could you imagine 9 million people having adverse events? How many of those people would be permanently disabled? How many would die? Already, the adverse events are ones that will keep a person from, quote, unable to perform normal daily activities, quote, unable to work, quote, require care from doctor or healthcare professional. How will that overwhelm our entire medical facilities? If all the people start going to a doctor, there wouldn't be enough doctors. If a doctor did nothing every day except see 10 patients a day, every doctor in America would be doing nothing but that. Do you see? No one's looking at the bigger picture. And this, by the way, comes from the CDC. I'm only quoting exactly the CDC. 3,000 people, quote, unable to perform normal daily activities. And we know that most of those bad effects are going to come a little later. So that's that. So sometimes you have to let a system collapse in order to see what was wrong to build a better new system from it. And I think that's the case. I appreciate your call. Thank you. I'm going to play a tape in a moment. But before that, I was watching some people that was sent to me on YouTube, some of these young woke people, and talking about we've got to get rid of the word picnic because it's racist. And it was used when, picnic derived from when slaves were killed or blacks were killed, hung from trees, mutilated. That happened, by the way. It wasn't because of picnic, but now we got to get it out of the lexicon, get it out of our language. It's racist to speak it. It's racist to use it. If only you were right. But as always, you're wrong. Actually, the French word first found in a French book in 1692 entitled The Origine de Language from Francois de Monage, the word pique-nique described a social gathering where attendees each contributed to a portion of the food, much like a covered dish dinner. It didn't enter the English language until over 100 years, in the early 1800s. In the late 1800s, there was a picnic-like atmosphere during lynchings when white men and women and kids watched the murders while eating deviled eggs, lemonade, and whiskey. But the word picnic did not, I repeat, did not originate with these brutal events. An example of civic illiteracy among our youth, in 2018, the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Foundation gave a sample of Americans a test based upon the exam for U.S. citizenship. Only 19% of the people under age 45 passed, while 74% of those over 64 did, meaning even elderly people who learned the material more than 40 years ago can summon it from memory better than recent grads from college. Similar studies have found a regression in knowledge of U.S. history. Today's school universities are presiding over a nationwide revision of civic illiteracy. And that's unfortunate, but that's the case. I have hundreds of examples of woke being brain dead. I'll share it when I can. On my next one, why Abraham Lincoln was not a racist, therefore tearing down his monument. But had he not been president, had there not been a civil war, you'd still have racism today. So you want to demonize the person who was killed. By the way, you got to read history and understand John Wilkes Booth and the conspirators around him. Anyhow, that's another story. So let's finish our program today, and we will be done in about 6 minutes from WBAI. So Michael G. Haskins or Reggie, at 55 to the hour, you'll break free. Everyone else, continue to listen because this is very important. Why? Because you're going to hear the latest talk from Dr. Michael Yeadon, Y-E-A-D-O-N. Why should we hear him? Because he was at not just the table, he was the Anthony Fauci throughout the entire pharmaceutical industry. He was the leading scientist, immunologist, virologist, geneticist. He was one that had 37 years in the field, published countless peer-reviewed journals. He was the go-to person. He was also top scientist at America's largest pharmaceutical company. So he was pro-vaccine, still is pro-vaccine. So he's ultra orthodox. But listen to what he has to say now that he is retired and he is taking a careful look at COVID.
Is Dr. Michael Yeadon. My original training was a first-class honours degree in biochemistry and toxicology, followed by a research-based PhD into respiratory pharmacology. And after that, I've worked my entire life on the research side of the pharmaceutical industry, both big pharma and also biotech. My specific focus has been inflammation, immunology, allergy, in the context of respiratory diseases, so the lung, but also the skin. So I would say I'm a kind of a deeply experienced inflammation, immunology, pulmonology kind of research person. I initially became concerned about our response to the coronavirus pandemic towards the middle or back end of April, as early as that, it had become clear that if you look at the number of daily deaths versus the date, the pandemic had turned, and really pleasingly already. The wave was fundamentally over and we would just watch it fall for a number of months, which is what it did. And so I became very perturbed about increasing restrictions on the behaviour and movement of people in my country. And I could see no reason for it then, and I still don't. Government's response to emergencies is guided by the scientific group who sit together under the Strategic Advisory Group for Emergencies, or SAGE. So they should provide scientific advice to the government about what's appropriate to do. SAGE has got several fundamental things wrong, and that has led to advice that's inappropriate and not only has had horrible economic effects, but has had continuing medical effects in that people are no longer being treated properly. SAGE took the view that since SARS-CoV-2 was a, quote, new virus, that they believed there wouldn't be any immunity at all in the population. So I think that's the first thing. I remember hearing that and I puzzled, because I already knew, because I read the scientific literature, that SARS-CoV-2 is 80% similar to another virus you may have heard of called SARS that moved around the world a bit in 2003. And more than that, it's quite similar in pieces of it to common cold causing coronaviruses. So when I heard that there was this coronavirus moving across the world, I wasn't as worried as perhaps other people were, because I figured that since there are 4 common cold causing coronaviruses, I figured that quite a lot of the population would be exposed to one of those viruses and would probably have a perhaps substantial protective immunity. And just to explain why I was so confident, everybody knows the story of Edward Jenner and vaccination, and the story of cowpox and smallpox, and that the sort of old story was that milkmaids had very clear complexions. They never suffered from things like smallpox, that if it didn't kill you would leave your skin permanently scarred. And the reason that they had the protection was that they were exposed to a more benign related virus called cowpox. Edward Jenner came up with the idea that if it's cowpox that saves the fair maid, he reasoned that if he could give another person an exposure to the cowpox, he would be able to protect them from smallpox. Now, he did an experiment that you can't do now, and he never should have done it, but apocryphally or really, or maybe real, we're not sure, Edward Jenner acquired some of the liquid from a person infected with cowpox, relatively mild pustules that then go away. And he got some of this and he scraped it into the skin of a small boy. And a few weeks later, he obtained some liquid from some poor person that was dying of smallpox and infected the boy. And lo and behold, the boy did not get ill. And that gave birth to the whole field of what's called vaccination. And it's VAC. It comes from vacus, the Latin name for cow. So we are really familiar with the principle of cross-immunization. I've thought quite a lot about the vulnerable people in care homes, and there's an awareness that even though people are really careful and using PPE and so on, but that's only going to go so far in a kind of hothouse environment where people are pretty close together in a care home. So the question I've had all year is, once 1 or 2 people got the virus in a care home, why wouldn't almost everyone get infected? And of course, the truth is they didn't. And one interpretation of that distinction is that a large proportion of people in the care homes had prior immunity. At this time of year, about 1 in 30 people have a cold caused by one of these coronaviruses. And just like the protection against smallpox provided by previous exposure to cowpox, so people exposed to having had a cold caused by one of these coronaviruses, they're now immune to SARS-CoV-2. So 30% of the population was protected before we start. SAGE said it was 0, and I don't understand how they could possibly have justified that. There's a second and equally fatal, unaccountable error that they have made in their model. The percentage of the population that SAGE asserts have been infected to date by the virus is about 7%. I know that that's what they believe, and you can see it in a document they published in September called non-pharmaceutical interventions, and it says, sadly, more than 90% of the population is still vulnerable. It's unbelievably wrong. And I'm just going to explain why. They've based their number on the percentage of people in the country who have antibodies in their blood. And only the people who became most ill needed to actually develop and release antibodies around their body. So it is certainly true that the people who have lots of antibody were infected. But a very large number of people had milder symptoms, and even more people had none at all. And the best estimates that we can arrive at is that those people either made no antibodies or so low amounts that they will have faded from now. Recent publication on the percentage of care home residents who have antibodies to the virus was very, very interesting. This time they were using high sensitivity tests for antibodies. And they carefully picked out residents that never were PCR positive. These were people who never got infected. And they found that 65% of them had antibodies to the virus. They never got infected. So I believe there was high prevalence of immunity in that population prior to the virus arriving. Big story in the media recently was that the percentage of people with antibodies against the virus in their blood was falling. Now, this was cast as a concern that immunity to SARS-CoV-2 doesn't last very long. Well, anyone with knowledge of immunity would just simply reject that. It's not the way immunity to virus works. That would be T cells. So if the antibodies are falling gradually over time, which they have from spring to present, the only plausible explanation is that the prevalence of the virus in the population is falling. And that's why the antibody production gradually subsides. Less than 40% of the population are susceptible. Even theoretical epidemiologists would tell you that that's too small a number to support a consolidated and growing outbreak. Community immunity, herd immunity. So Sage says that we're not even close, and I'm telling you that the best science by the best scientists in the world, published in the top peer-reviewed journals, says they're wrong, that more than 60% of the population are now immune, and it's simply not possible to have a large and growing pandemic. Really good news, genuine good news to hear that there's data emerging from the vaccine clinical trials, and we are seeing vaccines that raise not just antibodies, but they're also producing T-cell responses. This is great, back to proper science, proper immunology. That's how immunity to viruses works. So my surprise though, and it's just annoying, that when we're talking about the percentage of the population that's still susceptible, we only talk about antibodies, like 7% from Sage. Why are we not talking about the 50% that have got T-cell immunity? And so you might be thinking, if Dr. Mike Eden is telling you these things, well, how come the pandemic isn't over? Well, this may come as a surprise to you, but I believe fundamentally it is over. The country has experienced almost a complete cycle now of the virus sweeping through the land, and we are at the end of it. London was horribly affected in the spring, and somewhere in early April they were experiencing several hundred deaths per day from people dying with similar symptoms, respiratory failure and inflammation. And at the moment, the number of people dying of SARS-CoV-2 in the capital is less than 10, so it's down by 98% or something like that. And the reason it's down is because there are now too few people in London susceptible to allow the virus to magnify, to amplify, to get an epidemic. And they would have been hit by now because they were the first.
Okay, that's part one. We have a part two that we'll play on Monday's show. And finally, just to let you know, the World Health Organization has deleted naturally acquired immunity, what he was talking about, from its website. That's according to the American Institute of Economic Research. So what could be showing us that our immune systems, our innate immune systems can help us, and we should be looking at how we can strengthen that, gone from the World Health Organization. So they're looking for only the vaccine. Mind you, this guy's a pro-vaccine. He created vaccines, yet he's going against the whole way that it's being handled today. Oh, and by the way, right now, for all of you listening from London or Great Britain, according to Whitney Webb, Another flawed data model from Imperial College to blame for the latest UK lockdown. Quote, the source behind the claim that a new COVID-19 strain in the United Kingdom is 70% more transmissible, Dr. Eric Volz of Imperial College, admits that the model that produced that statistic is flawed and that it is, quote, too early to tell if the strain is more easily spread. Well, on Saturday, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced extreme new measures just before the holidays due to that emergency of the new corona variant. Per Johnson, as well as UK's Chief Medical Officer, Chris Whitty, who also spoke at Saturday's press conference, the new strain, quote, nicknamed, is 70% more transmissible, but no evidence to show it is in any way more severe or deadly than previous strains. Therefore, one more way that bad science is being used politically for a quarantine that can only bring devastation to the people. I'm Gary Null. Thank you all for listening and have a nice day.